outside of racing, have you had any dangerous situations, just on a vacation or, Anna, I want you to beat Anna's story. Anna Heinrich had this story, and those of you that haven't listened to it, go listen to it, because there's a lot of lessons learned where she was, she was young and she gets on a boat, and then the boat driver's like, he turns off the motor. It's her and her friend. And then he's like, take your clothes off. And they're in the middle of the ocean at night. It's a great story. Yeah. And there's a lot of lessons learned in that. But have you had any crazy moments?
I think back to, so I worked, this is a tangent, but I worked as a nurse. I went to university and got my nursing degree and worked as a nurse for a period of time because I felt that I needed to have a real job in case the TV life, suddenly disappeared. And working, so I worked in the emergency department when I was working, and there was certainly times during that, during those years where, we'd have patients who would be drug affected or alcohol affected or mentally unstable. And there was times when, you felt unsafe. And even though you're in an environment where, technically you should be safe, there was certainly times when I felt unsafe. And one in particular, which happened after work, I'd finished an evening shift. So must have been about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. I had to, where our cars were parked was quite a walk. So I had to walk to my car, got in my car, and I was driving home. And I just had this sense that the car behind me was following me. And it, you sort of second guess, are they really following me, or they just happen to be going down the same street? And I actually just knew in my gut that something was wrong. And and then I thought, well, I'm not going to go directly home. I'll just go a different way. And I started going down streets that you wouldn't drive down those streets unless you were needing to go that way. And this car continued to follow me. And it got more and more intense. And I knew that 100% this car was following me. So I rang, and my husband Will was away at the time. He does a lot of traveling and he wasn't home. And so I think I rang my mum, because you always ring your mum, and was like, I'm getting followed. This car's following me. And obviously, you're starting to panic. And I was, really, really scared. And she just said, call the police. So I hung up to her, and I called, 000 and said that somebody was following me. And then it was very obvious at this point that they were following me, and they kept coming right up to my car. And then I was screaming on the phone to the police, asking what to do. And they said they were going to stay on the phone, never hang up, but they were directing me to the local police station. And then I remember coming up to a set of traffic lights, and they were red. And I was like, I don't know what to do, because I don't want to stop at the traffic lights. And the police were like, just go through the lights. Just don't worry about the red, ensure that it's safe, but keep going. Do not stop your car, which I did. And, I suppose to put it in context, it's 10:30, 11 at night. I'm alone in these dark streets, and there's a car following me, and I was terrified. And and the car then started getting a bit more aggressive, and it was coming right up and hitting the back of my car. And by this time,
it was making contact with your bumper. Yeah,
making contact, and I'd lost everything by this point. I was not calm, not cool.
Wow. And
eventually, I remember turning into the street, and I could see the police station. And then this car just sped off, and because I obviously realized what I was doing, and I parked my car in the police station, and I just ran in screaming, crying my eyes out. And I do remember I had my pen in my pocket, because obviously I'd just come from work, and I scribbled down the number plate on my hand. And anyway, then filed a police report and all that sort of stuff. And I don't think in my life I'd ever been so terrified at that time. And it, for what felt like hours, was probably only, maybe 15 minutes, but it was horrible, a horrible experience. And just feeling so vulnerable was a really awful feeling at the time.
Now, do you think you were targeted? They knew, hey, did you ever get the backstory? Was this someone who had been in the ER and saw you and decided?
I never did. And I was unsure whether it was just a random, because, there had been stories of young women in that car park getting harassed, or whether it was a former patient. I don't know. I don't know any of the story, and I could probably make up stories in my head. But it just, and I suppose it just, again, it was a bit of a realization and a wake up call. Like, you know, you need to be a bit more self-aware. Like, you're walking in a dark car park, leaving a hospital, like that, you know, you're in a vulnerable position. And
man, there's a lot of lessons learned in there. And what's interesting is you did all the right things. Number one, listen to your gut. You listen to your instincts, which a lot of people ignore it. But in order to, you know, listen to your gut, you have to be paying attention to what's going on, because if you would have never actually been checking your rearview mirror, checking your mirrors as regular as you were, then you would have never noticed that someone was going the same route as you. And then you start doing that, you know, process of elimination, like with your turns. You start stair-stepping through a neighborhood and they're stair-stepping with you. I mean, that is guaranteed that, you know, they're following you. So you did your own like process of elimination. Pattern of life, you know, I talk about it all the time on here. Your pattern of life is that routine you set each day. The problem with it is that routine, if watched by a bad guy, they learn it too. Then they know what your vulnerabilities are. And the vulnerabilities for most people is always the same. It's going to be either driveway at your home, the parking lot at your favorite place you go to or gym every day, or that parking lot at work. I mean, those are all points of attack. And paying attention to your pattern of life, and the goal is to make it irregular.
Yeah.
You don't, you know, if you're turning on lights at, you know, let's say 5 a.m. to get ready every morning, that is, you're just talking directly to a bad guy, right? So it's like the simplest things is don't turn on your lights at 5 a.m., right? Just change up the timing on some stuff, and change up the time in which you leave, change up the time in which you show up, you know. And the other thing, you know, that you didn't have to deal with, but dialed into all this is social media. You know, always give yourself 24 to 72 hours before you post. Don't post real time and let everybody know where you're at. I like the fact that, you know, not stopping at red lights. You know, I don't do that even when I don't have anybody follow me. I just drive through red lights. I mean, if it's safe, I'm like, fuck it, I'm going. You know, I don't have time for this shit. You know, calling the cops, right, and letting the cops, you know, direct you straight to them. You know, so any of you young ladies, you know, listen to this, you know, these are all, you know, listen to that story again, because Riana just gave you the formula to surviving it, and take time to remember those license plates, vehicle characteristics, what color, you know, if there's anything that stands out like a dent, you know, you made contact with you. So that's I mean, that leaves a mark on both vehicles, you know, which is evidence later. But man, that's a good story. Thanks for sharing that. That's really good. And that's what this show is all about, is, you know, getting that information out there. You're listening to Can You Survive This Podcast? Thanks for tuning in. Please make sure to subscribe, rate, and share on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your favorite shows.